you know, as a theme, can't help but notice this continuing presence of sex negativity around every attempt to, you know, push the needle, push the needle towards better sexual health. I mean, we've been talking a lot about just what goofy jobs these are.
Yeah.
In a sexually healthy world, there would be no such thing as sexuality educators, because that's what parents are. And sex therapists, like we talked about a couple of weeks ago. Why aren't all therapists sex therapists?
Sure.
Right? Why is this weird specialty, and does that not continue to stigmatize the whole subject?
Well, I think certainly in a lot of ways it does. You know, for years I've sort of been, you know, joking around, saying that as long as I live in this country, I'll never be out of a job.
Yeah.
And that's not anything that makes me feel good. Right. It kind of saddens me. Right? One of my fantasies, and I've got a few, but one of my fantasies that I can talk about here is sort of waking up one day and realizing that we get it.
Sure.
Right? We know what we have to do.
Yeah.
Right? We're doing it. It's not anything big deal. It's not anything we have to go out of our way for. We finally accept sex and sexuality as a part of who we are and what we do, and is finally a degree of normalcy that's set in. I guarantee you I'll be dancing in the unemployment lines.
I think you'd be waking up in Denmark or someplace.
Yeah, certainly not here.
That's part of the frustration of having these weird jobs, is that it's embarrassing that there's so many other places in the world that do get it, that sexuality and sexual health is a no-brainer. It's a matter-of-fact part of life. Remember that conference in Miami? Was it Venezuela? We were at the sexual medicine conference, and a physician from Venezuela said there were 21 sexual health clinics in the country. 21 sexual health clinics in Venezuela, and how many do we have in the United States?
Not only Venezuela, and earlier this year I was in Cuba, and Cuba actually has a very big and a very active sort of national clinical sexology organization, and they are very busy. They're out there. They're doing all kinds of things that we're not even doing here. So the fact that Venezuela and Cuba are seemingly more advanced in the acceptance and practice of sexual health is a little mind-boggling.
And why aren't we embarrassed about that?
Well, we should be.
People in this country, it makes me nuts. Everybody loves to scream, US of A, we're the greatest country in the world, screw everybody else. And we fail.
Well, that's kind of our problem.
Yeah.
We have screwed everybody else. Yeah. And I think in the process, you know, we're number one, we're number one. We lead the world in unintended pregnancies. We lead the world in sexually transmitted infections, including per capita rates of HIV and AIDS. We lead the world in sex crime, victimization, sexual problems. If it can go wrong with sex and sexuality, we are number one.
We're number one.
Right.
Yeah, something we should be
and that's,
proud
you know,
of.
we should get, I guess they have the big fingers for football games. So we have like big foam penises that we can raise. We're number one in everything that can go wrong with sex.
We were trying to figure out what percentage of therapists have training in sexuality, even so much as an undergraduate sex ed course, right? Or how many identify as sex therapists. We've mentioned on the show before this national, now somewhat international organization, our professional home called ASECT, the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. And at last count, I believe there's somewhere around 700 some odd certified sex therapists through ASECT. Again, not the only organization, but the largest. And
well, the only certifying body.
Right, as a private member organization that certifies its members. So 700, 750 certified sex therapists in the entire United States.
Right.
I'm sure there's 700 therapists between Boca, Delray, Fort Lauderdale, right? Why is this like a single percentage point? Why is it, you know, we're getting back to that conversation, why is this such a bizarre specialty in a field that deals with relationships and families and sex?
Well, I think there's issues that are very similar to what we used to deal with when we were working more in the field of, let's say, adolescent sexual health. Sex and sexuality is really kind of the one area that we've seen, particularly among professionals, where people think their own experience is good enough. Right? Even with adolescents, we'd have adolescents that would, say things like, "Yeah, what are you going to tell me about it? I've had sex 12 times. I know all about it." Right?
Or I was an adolescent.
Or I was an adolescent. And again, we know in that field, and we've said that before, that people really go into it because they care. They may have good intention, but they don't have the background, they don't have the understanding, they don't have the training. And sexuality is the only area, particularly in mental health, that I think people go into that with that attitude, that anybody can do it. So why don't people get certified? Why don't they get trained? Because they don't think they need to. Because they think they can just talk about sex as part of whatever they're doing and everything will be okay.
Well, I'm not denying that there are therapists that feel that way, but I would bet that there are far more who say, that's outside my wheelhouse. I don't have training in there, so I'm going to avoid the subject altogether.
Sure. But
right?
I think it's larger. I think there's less avoidance than there is just assumption.
How many graduate psychology programs have even the basic kind of undergraduate sex ed course that we do at Palm Beach State College?
Yeah.
How many medical schools? How many...
Less than 1% of marriage and family therapy programs even offer a course on sexuality.
Right. And we've said that before.
Mm-hmm.
I confess a lie. I keep saying I don't like to bash. I'd like to bash.
Yeah.
Right? Again, we were saying...
Bash away, my brother.
We were saying last week, we understand that a movement, a revolution, a way of getting people to think of these issues as from a sexual health perspective is truly the key.
Mm-hmm.
But this pathologizing trend is so powerful, it's so dominating the discourse that it seems this whisper, this mousy little, can we please talk about sexual health?
Well, it sells.
Yeah,
right? It sells. The sex negativity sells.
It does. The fear, the
getting
disease.
people to feel badly about themselves sexually sells.
Yeah. The history of comedy on CNN this week included George Carlin, and I swear I wrote these notes before that was on, but they showed the bit about his 7 dirty words that you can't say on TV and on the radio, and how crazy it is that was a comedy bit that basically turned into the law.
Right.
Right? People just assumed that was FCC law. Those were the 7 dirty words that you can't say.
Mm-hmm.
And how much that relates to sexuality and the messages about sex ed, the messages we get about language, the words that we grow up with, like pee and pee-pee and wee-wee, that if we can't even talk about our bodies,
sure,
and that the language is so censored that words about sexuality are censored because they're dirty words and naughty, and people have to just dance around because... well, you see how it relates.
Yeah.
So we have to say pee and poo and coitus.
All of those euphemisms.
Right? Right? You could call someone a fellator on television, but you can't call you can't certainly say a more slang word for a particular sex act. Mm-hmm. When Mike Myers did that goofy James Bond character, remember? It was in the ads all over television during the day whenever, hey, shag me, baby.
Right.
Like nobody knew what that word was because it was British. But you can't say, the granddaddy of all the cuss words.
Sure. But see,
people's heads will explode.
Isn't that the ridiculousness of that game? Because even in censoring it, you'll have, a word like F, space, space, space. Like we don't know what the word is. Right. Or they'll say
keys,
it and we see them saying it.
Hyphens.
Right. And they'll just maybe sort of bleep that out like we don't know what they're saying. I mean, you and I have both done exercises in some of our classes where, we go through all of that to show the discomfort that we have, right? How many nicknames do people have for penis? How many nicknames do people have for vagina? How many nicknames do people have for forehead?
Right.
Right? How many
That's the
nicknames do they
game.
have for chin?
Right.
Or knee? And we look at, how we refer to any non-sexual part of the body, we're okay with that. But when it comes to anything that is related to sex or sexuality, that's where we have to get ourselves as far away as possible.
So we have a culture that is so humiliated, so embarrassed of our very selves, our very bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it's a big shock and big surprise that we are so sexually unhealthy, that we lead the world in an inability to get a handle on basic health aspects like we end up talking about every week, right? The thing, the most unsexy aspect of a show about sex is how sexually unhealthy we continue to be.
Sure.